You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello, once again, to another journey into the unexplored, the unexplained Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And today we have something spooky, right? Isn't that unusual, Verna?
People would think that we celebrate Halloween every day.
I know. Well, we sort of do, I guess, on this show.
Kinda on every show.
Well, we like
it's called Ecto Portal, but today we are taking a journey to another portal.
Ooh.
A portal through mausoleum doors.
Interesting. So,
follow us if you dare.
Haunted mausoleums, I'm sure, and I know there's plenty around the world because we've both been at different mausoleums in different parts of the country, and they have history and stories and things that happen in them. So I'll be curious to see what some of these other locations that we haven't been have to offer.
You know, as far as mausoleums, here in the Bay Area and nearby, in Oakland Mountain View Cemetery has the most elaborate mausoleums. I mean, they look like little houses everywhere on the hills. Yeah,
and I think that's a lot of the effects of the gold rush and stuff too, where families had the money to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. You had to have the money to build something beautiful and elaborate like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them look like little chapels, little churches, little houses. Yep. And there's one that me and my boyfriend always visit that has no name on it. It's the only one that has no name.
Is it rubbed off or it just purposely has no name?
You know, I think it's been rubbed off. I think it used to have a name, but now we don't see a name on there.
Oh, okay.
And we tried to look for it. We tried looking around, and there's no name. But we once got an EVP in there, so.
Interesting. Maybe next time you're around, you should ask with your recorder, can someone tell me the name of the family name whose mausoleum this is?
I'm not sure if I already asked that, but I'm willing to ask again.
There you go. Find out whose it is.
Because,
you never know.
Believe it or not, I always make it a point to visit that mausoleum whenever whenever we take a walk in that cemetery. I don't know why.
Hey everyone, Eric here. I am the host of the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Wednesday as I delve into the unseen world with historians, authors, researchers, and investigators as we try to understand and make sense of the paranormal. You can listen to past and future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or at unseenparanormalpodcast.com. Please like the show on Facebook and share with your friends. And remember, some of the scariest things are unseen.
When I was back east in upstate New York in what mythically is Sleepy Hollow for Hawthorne fans, is actually the town of Tarrytown. Their cemetery and mausoleums go back to the Revolutionary War.
Oh, wow.
So they're gigantic. In fact, the Dark Shadows movies shot their exterior graveyard scenes in the Tarrytown Cemetery. So It's spooky. It's this old Gothic style. They're gigantic. They're like little cathedrals
Wow.
spread around the graveyard. So I was very happy and having a good time looking around at just the design of those. And we were trying to find the Dark Shadows locations for the mausoleums, and we located them all. And then I did EVP work everywhere. It was kind of cool. I mean, I guess you kind of have to be twisted a little bit to have a good time in the graveyard for the day, but that's us.
Well, but it's so cool though, because the history and everything. Now, I have to ask you, since these mausoleums go back to the 1700s, is the architecture definitely a little different than the mausoleums that came later in the 1800s and early 20th century?
They're actually a lot bigger. They're more ornate as far as statuary goes. There's a lot bigger doors. There's more copper and bronze doors. They're just more elaborate, almost like you said, like little houses, little plantations. It's like little replicas of plantation houses. So it was very, very cool to see them all, and of course take pictures of them all. And even the cemetery and the mausoleums I took pictures of in Edinburgh when I was in Ireland or Scotland.
Oh yeah.
In Scotland, they have, again, same idea. There's a lot of really old ones, and then there's newer ones, but elaborate, and they all vary so much.
Wow.
Actually, it wasn't Edinburgh. It was I think Glasgow. I think Glasgow is the one that had the
Glasgow. Oh yeah.
And it was a whole mausoleum cemetery up on the hill with a giant cathedral church overlooking the town. So it was pretty cool.
Wow. Now, with your experience, besides getting EVPs, when you walked in, could you feel a presence? Could you feel a presence in these places?
In parts of it. I mean, in some of the older parts, you kind of do walking around, especially if you're by yourself, because you're more apt to pay attention to what you feel when you're looking around.
Sure. You're not distracted. Yeah.
And you pay more attention. You look at the details a little bit better. If you're with someone else, you're talking and you're kind of overlooking stuff. But by yourself, yeah, I would say there's definitely something around. I also felt that in the New Orleans cemeteries with their crypts.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yeah. My friend Terry told me a lot about the old Civil War cemeteries he used to visit as a kid.
Yep.
Yeah, he actually saw a ghost in one of those cemeteries. That was the figure of a man that approached him. Yeah.
See, and that's pretty cool. I mean, how many people can say, A, I saw a ghost, and B, I saw a ghost in a cemetery? To me, that's almost like, take a ghost sighting up a notch, that you actually saw them in a cemetery.
Well, it was actually a man. He was asking he lost his friends because his friends was walking around. Now, Terry, if I'm saying the story wrong, you can correct me. But from what he told me...
You can sue her, Terry. It's okay.
Thanks a lot. But he was about 12 years old, and he went with his friends. His friends were walking around. You know how you walk around, and you kind of lose people when they're looking around, and he couldn't find them. So he was looking for them, and he saw a man standing there. And I think he said the man was next to a fountain or something like that. Mm. And he walked up to him and he asked him for directions, and the guy pointed it out. And he said that the guy kind of looked a little off, like he just looked different. And he said, "Well, you know how somebody looks. You know how you can tell somebody's different. I mean, by their presence. It could be their dress, their presence. But he said that he turned around to say thank you, and the guy was gone. And then he realized that it was a ghost.
Was it an old man?
And I don't think it was an old man. I think he mentioned that he looked like just maybe in his 40s, just a man in his 40s or something like that.
I wonder how he was dressed. Though.
Yeah, I know. I have to ask Terry that story again. And he said that he told me he said that he ran back to the car. He said that his friends came, and he finally saw them, and he said, "We're going." He said, "We're leaving," and he ran back to the car so fast that he said that you never saw him dart like the Roadrunner so fast back to the car.
Yeah, once it dawns on you, you like freak out. You're like, "We gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta get out of here."
Well, especially since he was 12 years old, and it's kind of it's. When you're young and impressionable, that can be a scary thing when you realize, look who you just spoke to.
Yeah, most people don't realize it now. In fact, I bet you a lot more people have had ghost experiences in a graveyard and just never realized it. Like waving to the caretaker they thought was the caretaker, and it's an elderly person, only to turn around they don't see him anymore, and just think nothing of it. Like, oh, it's just the caretaker. He probably went and did something else. Who knows how many people have had experiences they just never realized.
Yeah, my boyfriend claimed he did. He said that him and a friend were in high school still, and they were sitting on a grave. They were sitting on a gravestone, and I think they were just having a drink or something. They were just, drinking sodas, or I don't know what they were drinking, but he said they were just sitting around drinking, and they were just talking. And then this older man walks up to them, and the man said to them, "This is not a picnic ground." And his friend was kind of a smart aleck. They were at that smart aleck stage, high school. And he said, "We never said it was." And then they turned around and the man was gone. And they said that he looked rather off, like his clothes were period clothes, or they looked like he was wearing old clothes that looked kind of different than the era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He could have been just a man visiting, but they turned around and he was gone.
Well, what's ironic is back in the olden days, as we both know, especially the Victorian era, it was a picnic spot. That was the most common place for families to go and have a picnic, was next to their loved ones in the graveyard.
Right, exactly. And if my boyfriend's listening and I said the story a little wrong, then forgive me. I'm just giving the basic details.
He also has permission to sue you.
I didn't know he doesn't. I didn't say who it was or where it was or anything. You silly.
So do you want to go ahead and share some of these mausoleums, and you can go ahead and start us off? And
sure, yeah.
If it springs any memories to mind, go ahead and add those and share those as we go along as well.
Sure. Okay. Now this one takes place in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's Spring Grove Cemetery. And this is actually, I'm going to give credit to an article that was done by Joy Neighbors. She did an article about haunted mausoleums. And thank you, Joy. If you're listening, we went ahead and we're going to go ahead and read about these. And this one actually looks like a little church with the steps and everything. It's really beautiful. It was built in 1869 for whiskey baron Edmund Dexter. He was one of Cincinnati's wealthiest residents in the mid-1800s. When Dexter died, he was laid to rest in this Gothic Revival mausoleum, which contains 12 marble crypts where 4 generations of the Dexter family are buried. And besides its claim of being haunted, it also boasts the only 2 flying buttresses in Cincinnati. So it's been rumored that 2 large white dogs protect the mausoleum, although it isn't known if they were once pets of the Dexters. Legend has it that if you sit on the steps of the mausoleum, the dogs will appear. If they believe you to be good, they'll run past. If they're not sure of your intentions, they'll stop and watch you. If they sense that you're up to no good, they'll growl in advance. So they said it's best to be up to only good when you visit. I don't know if they're ghost dogs or they're white dogs that are stray dogs around the cemetery. Who knows? It's
interesting because you always, in mythology books, movies, legends, you always hear about devil dogs being black with red eyes. And this is kind of the flip side of that, where they're actually white dogs that are sensing whether you're good or not. And so it's an interesting kind of a counterbalance to that. Like they are protectors of the mausoleum somehow.
Right. And also, it could have been the ghosts of the former owner's pets. Mm-hmm. Sometimes our pets can be spirit guardians later on. I feel so. Yep. It could be, but who knows? But it's interesting that people have seen those dogs.
Yeah, that's crazy, especially in a cemetery at a mausoleum. It's like, well, you know that most dogs wouldn't even be allowed in because they're mostly gated communities, the cemeteries and the mausoleum areas.
Right, and I think they said if you sit on the steps, so I think it's on the outside, the steps of the mausoleum.
Yeah, that's still pretty cool.
It is very cool, and those are some steps. So
yeah, they are. It's beautiful. It looks like a little cathedral. The mausoleum does. Itself.
Yeah. Now the next one's in Decatur, Illinois, and this one is Greenwood Cemetery, and I think a friend of ours has relatives in Decatur, so I wonder if they've seen it. So. Anyway,
possibly. It's pretty elaborate.
It is. It's huge. It looks like a huge house.
It kind of reminds me of an old English gated house where you had like the opening guard gate towers.
Exactly. Yeah. And this one was actually built in 1908, and it ran into trouble when leaks developed due to the construction. And the Cemetery Association soon ran out of money, and ghost stories began to circulate as the grounds fell into disrepair. And by the 1950s, what had once been a beautiful garden-style cemetery became actually a magnet for negativity. It became a very negative place. People started hearing disembodied voices, crying and screaming. And by 1957, the building was declared unsafe and was closed. Family members were notified to relocate their loved ones, and 100 bodies were never claimed. Some were never identified, and eventually the Cemetery Association buried them in common graves across from where the mausoleum had been.
Wow.
So it was 1967 when the mausoleum was finally raised. Today, the site is still vacant. No burials have been made there, and there's still reports of voices along with lights wandering near the common graves. Perhaps they say a lost soul, or who knows, maybe it's the relatives wondering where their beautiful mausoleum is. So
yeah, exactly. It's just kind of a shame that something that elaborate and that so much detail, it just kind of just got forgotten so quickly.
Yeah, and then torn down, because look how beautiful it was. And
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, if I were a family and then my relatives were buried in common graves, and you went through so much trouble to build a beautiful mausoleum for them, of course you would be upset.
Yeah, but I guess it comes down to how many families were still existent, how many families even lived in the area that even knew that this was going on. And
oh, right, the descendants did nothing about it. Yeah.
If you put out feelers in the local paper, like, hey, if anybody's no relatives buried here, you might want to come claim them and rebury them. But if you live in another state, if you live in another country, and your former descendants in this town or this city, you'd never know about it, and that would be the end of it. You'd probably never know where to look anyway, even if you went back to look for your relatives. So there you go.
No, you're going to be talking about one too.
Yes, I have one from Highland Lawn Cemetery from Terre Haute, Indiana. It's called the Sheets Mausoleum.
Sheets Mausoleum.
Yep. Martin Sheets was born in 1853 and lived into his early 70s. He saw many technological changes during the time. One of the newfangled inventions he found an odd use for was the telephone. Martin had one installed in the family museum, just in case he was buried unconscious but alive and needed to summon help. It was stipulated in his will that what a phone line would be run from his crypt to the cemetery office. He then set up an account with the Indiana Bell telephone that kept the line paid for and active, just in case he ever needed it. Now, when Martin died, he was placed in the family mausoleum with his infant daughter. Several years later, his wife, Susan, passed away. When the family members found her, she was in the kitchen with the phone in her hand. They assumed she'd been attempting to summon help. But according to legend, when the mausoleum was unlocked to place Susan's casket next to her husband's, cemetery workers discovered the phone in the crypt was off the hook. Coincidence or a call to come home?
Crazy. I know that's a crazy story.
You know what's funny? It reminds me though, because I've seen this before. In England, I saw this, where you know how the graves have the little bells on them.
Oh yeah, right.
And that's because it's connected to a device that goes underground into the casket, so that if the person was ever found themselves not really dead and they were unconscious, they could pull this, and it would ring the bell in the cemetery, and they could come dig them up. And this and a lot of people
I heard of that.
Wondering, what are these little bells all over these gravestones, the really old ones? That's what that was for, is people had a fear of being buried even though they weren't dead. Of course, nowadays we know that,
when somebody's in a coma or something.
9 times out of 10, that's not going to happen. And these days, they really know you're dead because you've been like embalmed, you've been, you know what I mean, autopsied. It's a lot different now, but it's kind of ironic. And I mean, just think of the logistics of that. If you were in a coffin like this guy, if you put a phone in a mausoleum, you have to get out of your crypt, out of your coffin, out of your crypt, and then you get to make the call. So how what is the
Well,
logistics?
what if he woke up suddenly and he tried to make a call and nobody answered?
Well, if you're alive, I guess you'd wait around and keep trying to call, wouldn't you? Or try to remember
This is
the number and you'd call them. Come get me.
this is so morbid. And if the family, if the descendants are listening to this, I don't mean any harm. I'm just joking. But can you imagine somebody going into that mausoleum, discovering the phone, and then playing a practical joke, calling the cemetery office?
Yeah, I could see maybe some grave attendants who wanted a good practical joke, like, "Hey, come let me out."
And I could say they could say, "Hello, get me out! Come on!" And they're joking, ha ha, and then they hang up. They go, ha 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 ha, and then they come rushing over.
They go, "Row I, the left side, number 25. Come let me out."
That's terrible.
It is. Yeah, but that's kind of a weird story. If the old woman died, the phone was in her hand, and then the phone's off the hook inside the cemetery. That's just weird.
That's crazy. I mean, it's like, what did he do? Just wake just to say, hey, come on.
I mean, we'd want to see the phone in the mausoleum. Like, is it in an alcove? Could the wind have knocked it off? Could a bird?
I was thinking about that. Could the wind have knocked it off? And that's when that's why they found it that way.
An animal, a bird, whatever. We don't know, but it's a fascinating idea.
It is. Now, speaking of animals, there's an extra story about this mausoleum that you want to tell, right?
Yeah, this is another story in the same cemetery, but it's a different mausoleum. This is the Heinel Mausoleum. Terry Hott businessman John Heinel and his dog, Stiffy Green, would stroll through the town visiting with folks. Stiffy had received his name because of his stiff walking gait and green eyes, and everybody knew the pair. Now, on December 31st, 1920, John Heinel passed away, and Stiffy was inconsolable.
Aww.
He'd sit on the coffin at the funeral and followed the family to the graveyard, where he took up his post at the mausoleum doors. And there he remained, guarding his master in death as he guarded him in life. Now, family and friends made many trips to the cemetery that winter to retrieve Stiffy and take him home, only for him to return to his master's crypt doors. Now, you know what this reminds me of, don't you? Is that
that Hachi dog, the one that made the story about?
The Disney one where the guy's master died. What was the name of that? I even went and visited it when we were in Ireland.
Hachi.
No, it isn't Hachi. It had a different name than that.
It's not Hachi? Oh, okay, because Hachi was a famous dog. Yeah.
I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. But it was that Disney movie where the guy, he was buried in the cemetery. They wouldn't allow the dog in, but the dog kept going to his grave, master's grave, constantly. And
I don't think I know that one.
yeah, it was a famous Disney movie. I'll figure it out while we keep doing this, and I'll bring it up. Stiffy slowly mourned himself to death. Heinel's wife was so touched that she paid tribute to his unwavering love and devotion by having him stuffed in the sitting position he had seen for so long, on those cold mausoleum steps. Stiffy was placed inside the tomb, reunited at last with his master. Now, it wasn't long before the cemetery workers noticed that Stiffy mysteriously moved from one side of the tomb to the other and back. Now, sightseers began to visit after dark, and vandals would not leave the site alone, damaging doors and windows. Then in 1985, thugs shot out Stiffy's right glass eye. The family decided it was time for Stiffy to be moved, and the Vigo County Historical Society Museum agreed to take him. There, the Terry Hott Lions Club built a replica of the Heinel Museum as so that Stiffy could still be on guard. But rumors spread that just at twilight on autumn evenings, you can see an elderly man and a small dog walking near the Heinel crypt. The smell of the rich pipe smoke wafting through the air, and a low voice can be heard talking to his devoted little companion, who answers him with a happy bark as they take another stroll together.
Aw, isn't that sweet? But
Yeah.
what kind of meanie would shoot at a taxidermy dog glass eye? Come on.
Well, people.
People are nasty.
Yep, it's true.
It's a beautiful mausoleum, too. So it's kind of a shame that people had to get stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people don't think sometimes,
No, no. I would have liked I would have liked to have seen that, a picture of Stiffy and the actual mausoleum.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, yeah. So there's another one that's in South Carolina. It's called the Lagar Mausoleum. It's in a place called Edisto Island, and it's from the mid 1800s. That's when, well, actually, it's not from the mid 1800s, but in the mid 1800s, their relative Julia Lagar, she became sick with diphtheria. And her family watched as she suffocated, and she closed her eyes and passed away. And they laid her lifeless body on a stone slab in the family crypt. They closed the door, they sealed the keyhole with wax, and the family mourned, and, they did their best to move on, but, that's what they did. They had a funeral for her. So,
Yep.
Okay, years later, her brother was killed in the Civil War, and the family crypt was opened once again. The family moved the heavy door, only to watch bones fall out. The doors and floor were covered with claw marks. Julia didn't die from diphtheria, but spent her last moments alive trying to escape the crypt. Obviously, the family was very distraught with this scene. They quickly placed their son in the mausoleum and left, but they decided to visit him soon to make sure that he was indeed dead. So when they returned to the grave, the crypt door had a large crack down the middle. They replaced it, but it happened again, and again. So the mausoleum has remained doorless ever since, because Julia's spirit be protecting her brother from the same fate. Now that's kooky.
Now, what's funny is that, again, that goes back to what we said about this is the mid 1800s.
Right.
This is pre-Victorian, kind of. So there's still the fear of dying, the fear of not really being dead. This would, if the woman had a telephone in her mausoleum,
the telephone could have been handy there. Yeah.
Not that they had it then, but she could have easily called her family. But even a bell, if she could have ringed a bell or something in the mausoleum.
Something. And don't think, folks, that I'm being unsympathetic. If that really happened to her, that's terrible. I feel terrible for her.
Yeah. So,
but it's weird that they buried him, and then they decided to go back to make sure he really died. I mean, couldn't they have just left an opening or something?
I know, and it makes you think about things like this. Stories like this is what made people paranoid enough to, like, well, I need a telephone, I need a bell. I mean, there's all kinds of old
This is what made
Tales from the Crypt comic stories from EC Comics, where it's about this man died, but he had a bell installed in case he wasn't dead. And again, it's all stemmed from reality. It's people's paranoia that if I'm not really dead, I may need to make sure somebody gets me.
And so, luckily these days in hospitals and stuff, we can read when somebody's really dead or not. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's rare cases where, like you said, they go into a coma, their heart may slow down enough where you can't recognize it. Now they can tell all of that stuff. But, it's just interesting how that led to a social outcry to where these bells were installed in graves and all that kind of stuff. It's just interesting. So you have
now, I think there's
one,
another one in, it's at Columbus, Ohio. It's in the Green Lawn Cemetery, and there's a large mausoleum that holds members of the Hayden family. And the legend says that if you knock on the mausoleum doors, a spirit will answer back with a knock. On rainy nights, people have also reported seeing a young boy leaning against its iron gates and crying, and they're wondering if he's actually buried inside.
Interesting.
So, it's beautiful. Yeah, and actually, it's very beautiful. And there's another story that comes from Cleveland, Tennessee. It's a 37-foot high mausoleum made of white Italian marble, and it's stained with what appears to be blood. So that's the Craig. Why don't you go ahead and tell us more about the Craig Miles Mausoleum here?
Okay, so in Cleveland, Tennessee is a beautiful 37-foot mausoleum. On October 18th, 1871, Nina Craig Miles, age 7, died in a tragic buggy accident. Her grandfather, who often took her on buggy rides, was thrown clear of the accident and survived. Now, her father, John Craig Miles, was deeply saddened by the loss and constructed a church, St. Luke's Episcopal Church, and a mausoleum in her honor. Soon after her burial, bloodstains began to appear. Now, shortly after Nina's death, her brother died. In 1899, John died of blood poisoning after a serious fall on an icy street. Nina's mother, Adelia, died in 1928 after being hit by a car when crossing the street. They all were placed in the mausoleum. With each death, the bloodstains got darker and more prominent. Could the spirits of the Craig Miles family be the cause of the mysterious red stains, or is it some kind of chemical reaction in the marble? I don't know. I wonder what that can be. If it's like weather, something to do with the weather. What's in the marble itself? Maybe they used to make marble.
Is it rust that looks really red? I mean, is there some kind of rust there or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would classify it as being a blood stain myself. But it's interesting. I mean,
right.
If you washed it off, you'd have to get some marble tested to find out what's in it, and could it oxidize or something.
But it's weird that with each death, the stains got darker. But I'm wondering if it just means that every time they dismantle, they open the doors and put somebody in, some of the construction gets a little weird, and then I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to say. You'd have to literally chemically test the marble or what the mausoleum's made of to find out if it oxidizes,
right?
If it comes in contact with oxygen, or if it's closed up for a while. Who knows?
Now they say that it's above the right column, and I'm looking and I don't see anything that looks like it, but I guess you have to get really close in order to see that.
I mean, I can see it if you look directly above it on the right side of that alcove. You can kind of see a red stain.
You can kind of see something. Yeah, it looks like kind of like a weathered stain or something.
Yeah, this is an alcove right above these two giant. It looks like could be copper or brass doors at one time. And right above this alcove, above the door on the right side, you see this little, I guess, blood stain supposedly. But I think it's reaching a bit. Who's to say what it is? Really? It could be dirt. Who's to say someone didn't throw something at it, like chalk or some kind of red liquid, and it just, perpetuate the legend? Kids like to do that. Well,
you never know. You don't know what people would do.
Kids, oh my God, they say there's stains above the door, and if they went out and threw like a, red ink or red paint at the mausoleum and it washed off but left this, who's to say?
You never know.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, there's another one that in Brunswick, New York, that you want to talk about.
The Forest Park Mausoleum. The Forest Park Cemetery, also known as the Pinewood Cemetery, is now abandoned and overgrown. Forest Park Cemetery was first incorporated in 1897, definitely during the Victorian era, by a group of wealthy Troy businessmen under the Forest Park Cemetery Corporation. Though based on older gravestones, the cemetery has been in use since at least 1856. Now, the original area chosen for the cemetery occupied over 200 acres of farmland in what was then the rural Brunswick, meant to outgrow and even outclass Troy's Oakwood Cemetery. It was originally designed by Garnet Baltimore, and the first African-American graduate of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Baltimore planned on the cemetery to offer visitors a park-like experience, complete with sanctuary, winding trails, and a large receiving tomb near the entrance. Again, emphasis on picnicking and spending days in the park and the cemetery, which was popular. The Forest Park Cemetery Corporation went bankrupt in 1914, and I noticed a lot of cemeteries seem to have gone bankrupt at the same time. And the cemetery was completed to the original plans. The only structure that had been built was the receiving tomb, which still stands today, albeit in a dilapidated state. The receiving tomb was built from granite and featured a copper roof with large skylight. It contained 128 marble catacombs used for storing corpses during the winter. Now, in 1914, the cemetery was reincorporated by New York City natives under the name Forest Hill Cemetery, and due to financial difficulty, the corporation sold all but 22 acres to the neighboring county club of Troy for use in the construction of a golf course. Again, old cemetery becomes a golf course. Sounds familiar, San Francisco. Regardless, the corporation also went bankrupt during the 1930s. The cemetery went mostly unattended, except for a local man named William Christian, who volunteered to be the caretaker and did so from 1918 until his death in 1961. Now, Christian kept
That's
notes.
a long time.
It is a long time. Christian kept notes of interments, which indicate that the cemetery served upwards of 1,400 burials. And burials continued in the cemetery until about 1975, and that's when the cemetery went completely unattended. He probably passed away by that point.
Yeah.
Until 1987, control of the cemetery was in dispute. During that year, control was vested into the town of Brunswick at the decree of New York State, and in response to the town, created a Forest Park Cemetery Advisor Council in 1991, but ended up being disbanded in 1994. Now, based on local obituaries, the cemetery was put back into use in the late 1990s and has been used as recently as 2005 for a burial. Employees of the town of Brunswick made multiple attempts during the 1990s and 2000s to remove the overgrown brush and plants, which had become a major problem. And in 1988, the cemetery was featured in the local Times Record newspaper for 2 youths discovered a partially exhumed grave. 2 shovels, a pick, and several beer cans can be found at the crime scene. Although police reports were filed, no one was apprehended for the crime. And according to urban legend, this cemetery is also a gateway to hell. Now, people have reported that a headless...
Oh, lovely.
Yes. People have reported that a headless angel statue bleeds from the neck, which many believe is just moss. The mausoleum, or for the before mentioning receiving tomb, was opened by the residents, revealing that there was no bodies inside. People believe the bodies disappeared or walked off. Others argue it was simply a holding area for bodies to be buried, and it never served as a final resting place. That I probably believe more. That's interesting, though.
Yeah, boy, that place has been through everything.
Yeah, but when a cemetery gets left, I mean, that happened in San Francisco. All those cemeteries we had, they were left and abandoned and broken, and they were eyesores.
It's true.
People stole headstones, and I'm sure people dug graves up and took skulls. And people are weird. They'll do anything to that kind of stuff. But this isn't terribly surprising. It just, they used to have vast, great cemeteries, and everybody had to be buried back then, and everybody had to have a gravestone, and it was a lot of real estate. But nowadays we realize, cremation is probably easier, more compact, less space. It's obviously healthier because you don't have decomposing bodies in the ground, so you can, you just have ashes. So it doesn't surprise me that things have changed, but obviously real estate takes a big factor here too. Yep.
Yeah, Spring Valley, Illinois. The Massock Mausoleum. It's called Massock Mausoleum. Yeah, belonged to the Massock family. And this one was established in 1914. It holds less than 20 memorials in there. And in the corner of the cemetery stands a mausoleum with the bodies of 2 brothers. According to the legend, the hatchet man guards the mausoleum at night and chases off anyone that enters the cemetery. As with many cemeteries, there's been a lot of vandalism. And then in the 1960s, a local boy allegedly broke into the mausoleum and took a skull. The boy drove around town with the skull on his dashboard. Once the word got out that it was indeed real, the skull was returned and the mausoleum doors were cemented shut. In recent years, a burned dog's head was found on the mausoleum steps and was linked to animal sacrifice. Another legend tells of a reporter who poured holy water down the vent of the mausoleum, which caused a groaning noise from inside. People also reported a pale and thin apparition walking around at night. Now,
Wow.
What kind of weirdo is going to drive with a skull on his dashboard that he just took from a mausoleum?
A teenager who thinks it's funny and cool. You got to remember, at least when you go into the mausoleum, it's just going to be a skeleton in there. It's not going to be a body. But still, I mean,
I know, but come
kinda
on.
sick. It's kind of sick, and it's obviously disrespectful, which I see why they cemented up the front of the mausoleum so nobody could get inside.
So it was returned, but I don't know who. Was it returned by him or his friends? But
Probably,
who knows?
someone probably told on him, and they probably pressured him to put it back. I'm more intrigued by the reporter pouring holy water down the vent of the mausoleum and causing groaning to come from inside. That's fascinating to me. Like, what happened there? Like, why would a reporter do that?
Well, it could. Now it could be that it's the stone, like the hollow bottom inside.
Maybe, but it sounds like if a reporter did it, they were probably writing a story about the legends and the history of the mausoleum, and probably thought, you know what, let me pour some holy water down here and see if I get a reaction of some kind. Maybe it's that little hole.
Would you do that?
Do you see that little hole at the base of the door?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's where he poured it down.
Now, would you do that if you were visiting just to get a reaction?
No, I couldn't really see a purpose in it. I could see where a reporter for a story might do it, just so he can, even if he heard anything, he could claim he heard this and just write it. Could be a Halloween story that he wrote. Who knows?
Yeah, well, if you do it just to get a reaction, it's disrespectful. But if you're doing it because you're trying to be nice and you think, well, let's just try to, make sure these ghosts are at peace and pour some holy water, that's okay. But
I wonder who the hatchet man is that used to run people off, though. I wonder who the hatchet man is.
I don't. They never said who the hatchet man was, and they also said that they reported an apparition walking around at night. Well, it is a graveyard. It doesn't necessarily mean it's near the family, but if it's walking near the mausoleum, it could be one of the family thinking, "What's going on?" Who knows?
Well, there's 20 people buried in there, so it's hard to say, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, grounds like that are probably filled with all kinds of apparitions. Family, friend of the family, somebody. I mean, it's a graveyard.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the ones that people witness and see. So who's to say there isn't a lot more that people don't see?
Remember the EVPs that you and Linda got at the graveyard in Colombia?
Yeah. Yep. And
it's you were mentioning some family names.
It's funny because people think, no one's going to ever get an EVP in a cemetery because nobody's going to hang around a cemetery. But they don't realize that, well, just because you're not in our physical world, that you're not still visiting the cemetery. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe you're looking at families' graves. Maybe you're following us, wondering why we're looking in a cemetery. But that doesn't mean there isn't someone.
Yeah, maybe you're just... Right, exactly. Maybe you're just looking in. So that was interesting. You mentioned some family names, and you got an EVP that said, we're all here.
Yeah. Which is well, I mean, and that could just be him literally looking around at the tombstones going, yep, we're all here.
Yeah, exactly. So I've always found mausoleums fascinating anyway.
I used to think, who's going to get an EVP in a graveyard? No one's going to get an EVP in a graveyard. Who in their right mind would want to stick around a graveyard once you've moved over and you're able to walk around and go anywhere? Why would you hang out in a graveyard? It's the last place you want to be, is hang around dead bodies, right? But then you find out, no, that's not.
I've always disagreed with that theory. The reason why I disagree with that, and here's my take, and I actually wrote a blog about this once, because emotions tend to run high.
Yeah.
And even if you think that somebody physically doesn't want to hang around a graveyard, when somebody is grieving or mourning, or when somebody is in grief or dying and they're grieving or they're dead and they've left behind a lot of pain, emotions are going to hang around the soul still. And if it's a place associated with that soul, you're still going to have leftover emotions. And I think that that's a prime place where you're going to feel leftover souls, leftover emotions, and their spirits are going to be drawn to it possibly.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that would be the attraction for some spirits. Like, could it be almost like a magnet for them in some cases?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I'm still one that does not believe any spirit is bound and attached and locked to any physical location at all. I think anybody who believes that, I think they make that up because they have no proof that that's the case. None of us have proof of any of this, but I don't, based on all the EVPs and all the investigations we have, I don't find that anybody who says, no, I got the name of so-and-so who died in this room and died in this building. No, you're thinly veilly sewing these thin straws together to come up with a conclusion that you want to hear. You know what I mean? They always use whatever they have as a basis for fact. It's a springboard for the imagination to create more. Like, well, obviously this happened, and because we just got this word death, that means they obviously died here. This one says still here, that means obviously they're still here after they died. And I see TV shows do it all the time, and it drives me insane. It's just making making a narrative based on the few words that you think are really associated, which may not be.
Well, there's no proof of it, but on the other hand, we don't know how emotions tend to linger in a place or linger near somebody, and it could be, and so we could be feeling the leftover emotions and grieving rather than the actual spirit of the person. And remember when you and I were at this columbarium and we saw that woman going up the stairs?
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Who knows who she was? It could have been somebody who was grieving for somebody who was grieving for somebody who died there. I mean, this is just an assumption. We don't know.
Yeah.
And it could be that she visited that place so often that her leftover residual energy is there, and you could still feel her grief. The grief is so deep that you could still see it and feel it.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that. That would be our joint together experience in a mausoleum where we actually saw an apparition of somebody. That was definitely an unusual one.
Yeah, we don't know the full stories, but definitely there's something that lingers afterwards that could be attracting somebody or something near these places.
What's interesting is when I get EVPs, I often get ones where the investigator will say, "We are in such and such location. Is there a reason why you stay here?" And then sometimes you'll get an EVP like, "I didn't know I was there. Where is that, or what is that?" It makes me really think that where they're at, they don't see everything exactly the same way we do. That it could be like I said, remember I always said the onion skin, where there's their atmosphere and ours are intertwined, so it doesn't look completely the same. So they don't always know where they're at and where they're, like people, you find EVPs of people on Alcatraz, and they just sort of laugh. The EVP you get them people laughing, saying Alcatraz, like they have no idea they're on Alcatraz. So it tells me that they're able to go to places and they don't really know exactly where they are in our world. It could be a different place.
Right. It's almost like they're in a dream state and they're trying to figure out where exactly they are. Just like when we're in a dream state, we don't exactly know our location, but we had a dream about it.
Yep. In fact, I think...
Interesting thought.
I think the way that in the spirit world, how it probably is closer is like we are when we dream, where we see details, we hear people talking, we see people, we see things happening. We don't always understand what they're doing. We move on. We're somewhere else. We're looking at someone else. We're watching someone do something, but we don't understand why they're doing it or why there's no connection. I think when we're asleep, we have some kind of connection to this particular world that we don't when we're awake. That's my theory. No? Sure.
And that's a good way of looking at it too. So
kind of an analogy.
It's interesting how these. Yeah, I mean that's the reason why I really like exploring these shows, and I really like exploring this side of things because we're forever searching, and it's who knows, maybe one of these days we're going to find an answer, or maybe it'll just remain a mystery, and it helps us to live our life better because we know that one of these days we're going to have more of an answer than we did years ago,
or now even.
I mean,
it's funny because listening to other investigators, what drives me insane is so many of them are so caught up in the dogma of what other investigators have told them, like, well, clearly this spirit is crossing over here, and that spirit can't do that because they're trapped here, and this spirit has to let go of this so they can't leave. I mean, it's just all BS that person is making up. And so many investigators buy into this whole oh, well, this spirit is trapped, and this spirit, this thing is a demon. Everything's a demon. Well, we don't know what a demon really is. We know what religion tells us, but that doesn't mean that that's what a demon is. So it's just it makes me.
Oh yeah, that drives me crazy too.
Yeah, it just irks me when people claim to be experts and professionals. I'm like, you're not an expert or professional in any of this because you don't have any answers and you can't prove any of it. So I'm a very skeptical investigator. I'm fascinated by it, and I found interesting results, but I don't buy into all this dogma of ghost investigations and ghost hunting. I just think it's funny when people buy into it hook, line, and sinker. I just sort of look at them and shake my head going, just use your own mind, use your own judgment, think for yourself. Don't just accept everything everyone tells you.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know. It's just funny that this mausoleum episode kind of reminded me of cemeteries, because a lot of people think, oh, like I did, you'll never get an EVP in a cemetery. Who'd want to hang around? Then I realized, to us it's a cemetery, to us it's a mausoleum, to them it may not even be a mausoleum or a cemetery, or they don't know where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So, and I think that we're actually exploring these things in with a different point of view than we ever used to.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because the more we do that, the more we're going to explore other possibilities with that.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
I'm probably not saying it right, but anyway.
Whenever we find these old stories that, this apparition had happened, or this ritual, or this person freaked out because this happened, we read them, but they got to think of them in the context of the time period they happened in, and what their beliefs and what their science and the knowledge of things were at that point.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
So I like it when we actually take stories and we think about it compared to today's terms. Well, this is probably what this was. This is probably what that was, etc. It's just fun finding the stories that we could look at.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
This is a good episode. Good topic, because there's always all kinds of mausoleums all over the world that people can investigate, and like the catacombs in Paris, I would love to do that.
Oh, I'd love to go over there. Yeah.
Yep. Who knows? Maybe in the future. All right, folks.
You never know.
That's another episode of Ecto Portal, and until next week, I guess we're gonna say goodbye. Bye.
Bye. Till next week.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden.